Hello students, in yesterday's class we have learned what is an array, how do we define an array, and how do we calculate the address of an element from an array. So today we are going to discuss about how we are going to store the values into an array. So once an array is declared, say for example we can declare an array as int a of an integer array as int a of 10. As soon as we declare this array, we'll just only get some memory for this array. As we have discussed yesterday, for integer each element we need 2 bytes of memory. So such elements we are going to store, such integer type of elements we are going to store 10 elements. So total we need 2 into 10, 20 bytes of memory. So for an array, as we get consecutive memory allocation. So in an array, if we define an array, all the 10 elements will get the consecutive memory locations. So consecutive in the sense in a sequence. So we'll get 20 bytes of memory in a sequence in your RAM. So once this memory is allocated, you are ready to store the values into an array. So in order to store the values into an array, we have 3 methods. First one is initialization, inputting values, and assigning values. So the first method we have is initialization. So in initialization, what we do is whenever we declare an array, we can assign values into it. So such type of assigning values into an array at the time of declaration is known as initialization. So in order to initialize an array, we have 4 basic methods. In that, first one is basic initialization, second is initialization without size, third is partial initialization, and fourth is initialization to all zeros. So in that, first we are going to see about basic initialization. So in basic initialization, we provide all the values of we assign all the values that an array is going to store. How do we do that? The syntax would be array name followed by its size is equal to its values. Say for example, if you define an integer array of 5 elements, so this array can be initialized at the time of declaration. That is, in this statement itself, it can be initialized as int a of 5 is equal to, so you need to start flower bracket, open, and all the values that the array is going to store should be provided within the brackets separated by commas. So say for example you are going to store 5 values, so all the 5 values should be placed within the flower brackets. So each value should be separated by a comma, 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. So as soon as you write this statement, your 5 memory locations allocated for your array A will be filled with the given corresponding elements. So in whichever order you place the elements here, in the same order your elements are going to be stored in the array. So as you know that array will have indexes or indices. So those index starts from 0, continues in sequential order 1, 2, 3, 4. As we mentioned, the size here as 5. So you will have size minus 1 as your last index. So here we have size as 5 minus 1 is equal to 4 will be your last index, and each and every array's index will start with 0. So if you want to refer an element, you will use this index. Say for example, if you want to refer the element 40, then you need to write the array name followed by its index number. So as the element 40 is stored under index 3, we need to write a of 3. So that is basic initialization. So basic initialization in the sense you will provide the size of the array. So whichever the size you provide, those many elements will be initialized within the flower brackets. Say for example, if you define an array like int a of 3, and if you are going to assign 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. So see, if you observe here, you said that the size of the array is only 3, whereas the elements you have assigned are 5, total 5 elements, that is only 3 are required, but extra 2 elements you have assigned. So while you assign the extra elements will get discarded. Only 3 elements will be taken into an array. So that is about basic initialization. And the second method in initialization we have is initialization without size. So initialization without size. So in this type of initialization, you need not mention the size of an array. So int a of, see here, I am not mentioning any size for this array, and I am assigning some values. 55. So as I mentioned 5 elements, as I initialized 5 elements here, the total size of the array will become 5. Say for example, if I declare like this, see how many elements I have initialized, only 2. Then the size of the array will become 2. So if you did not mention the size of the array here, so how many elements if you assign, that will become the size of an array. So this is the initialization of an array without size. Then third method we have is, partial initialization. So in partial initialization, say for example, if we mention some int a of 5, that is I am going to store 5 elements, but I am going to initialize only 2 elements. So elements less than the mentioned size will be assigned in partial initialization. Then what about the remaining 3? Total we need to store 5 elements. We need to initialize 5 elements, but we have given only 2 elements. Those 2 elements will be stored in the array from the starting positions in the order in which you have given the elements. So the same order will be stored in the array, but the remaining 3 elements will be filled with zeros. So only the partial number of elements will be assigned to an array, and the remaining elements will be filled with zeros. Then the last initialization we have is initialization to all zeros. So initialization to all zeros. In this method, here we will follow the rule of partial initialization. So as we know that here in this method, our requirement is the total array should be filled with zeros, right? So in partial initialization, if we give, say for example, if we initialize this to only one single element 3, so that single element will be filled in the first position and the remaining will be filled with zeros. In the same way here, when you want to initialize the whole array with the zeros, you just initialize the first element to zeros. So with this, what happens is the first element will be filled with the element you have given, that is 0, and the rest of the elements, so 5 elements we need, so the rest of the elements will be filled with 0. So when you observe, the total array will be filled with zeros. So the partial initialization rule can be used here in order to store all the zeros into an array. So now we have the second method, that is inputting values to the array. Inputting values. So this method involves taking values from the keyboard. So generally when we take values from the keyboard at the time of execution. So in order to take values into a normal variable, what do we use? We use scanf function. Say for example, %t comma some ampersand variable name. So like this, if you want to take some integer value as an input into a variable b, we write a scanf function like this. So in the same way, if you want to take input values into an array at the time of execution, then you need to write the same scanf function. But as we have, say for example, we have an array called marks, which stores 6 subject marks, okay, which stores 6 values. So in order to store these 6 values, we need to write normal variables, we need to write 6 scanf functions or 6 specifiers in a single scanf function. But whereas in while using arrays, you can use, in order to input values, you can use any of the loops available. That is, it may be either while, for, or do while. Either of the loops you can use in order to store values into the array. Say for example, you need to store 6 values into the array marks. So for that purpose, I'll take a for loop. Because why for loop I have taken? Because I know how many elements I need to store, how many repetitions I need to store. Total 6. So let us think our array marks with 6 memory locations, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So these are the indexes we have. So observe that our index starts from 0. So say for example, you need to define I here. So I is equal to 0. Why we are starting from 0? Because the array index starts from 0. I less than the size of the array 6. How much we need to increment is 0 plus 1 1, 1 plus 1 2, 2 plus 1 3. So plus 1 increment is observed in the indexes. So I plus 1 or I plus plus, either of them you can use. So I plus plus scanf %d comma ampersand marks of that index. So when you write like this, for the first iteration the value of I will be, the 0. So 0 less than 6, condition true, comes into the for loop. So the statement is scanf %d comma ampersand marks of I. So in the place of marks of I, in the place of I, the value of I will be substituted, marks of 0. So ampersand marks of 0. So the first value you are entering from the keyboard will be stored into the array marks with index 0. So that is, say for example, if I enter 10 here, this 10 will be stored in the array marks at index 0. That is the first place. So next, in the second iteration, I plus plus, so I will be incremented to plus 1. So now the value is 1. So in the second iteration, ampersand marks of, in the place of I, 1 will be substituted, and the value you are going to enter through keyboard will be placed at the address allocated to marks for index 1. So that is here. Your value 20 will be stored here. Likewise, until your loop will be executed for 6 times and all the 6 values will be stored in the array. So that is inputting. So then the third method we have for storing values into the array is assigning values. So assigning values, you can assign a value to a variable through assignment operator. So what is an assignment operator? How do we indicate it? Using is equal to. So in order to assign a value using assignment operator, you can assign it using each individual element of an array. So whichever the elements you have in an array, you can use this different elements. Say for example, you have an array scores which stores 3 elements. Okay, what would be the elements? Say for example, you want to store some 40, 80 and 50 values into your scores array. So your index starts from 0, ends with size -1, 3 -1, 2, 0, 1, 2 will be your indexes. This is your scores array, and you want to store, say for example, 40, 80 and 50 values into this array. So how do we can refer this element as array name followed with its index number, right? Scores of 1, scores of 2. So if you want to assign values to these elements, each individual element, so each individual element of this array could be assigned as scores of 0 is equal to 40, scores of 1 is equal to 80, and scores of 2 is equal to 50. See, after definition, at the time of declaration, if you mention 3, then that indicates the size of that array. Without any declaration, after declaration, just simply if you write the name of the array and followed by its number in the square brackets, this indicates the index of that element. So if you declare and write something here, that will be the size. Without any declaration, directly if you use the name of the array and mention some number here, that refers to the index of that element. So with this index reference, we can assign each individual value to its individual element in an array. But remember one thing, that we cannot assign an array into an array. One complete array cannot be assigned into a complete array in a single step. Say for example, we have scores of 3 is equal to 40, 80 and 50, comma, say for example, we have defined one more array 3 and I have not initialized values into it. Now I I just wanted to assign the values of scores 3 into the first of 3. Say for example, this is the array scores. I cannot assign directly the arrays, or so if you want to store the score values into first of 3 is equal to scores of 3. I cannot write like this in order to assign all the 3 values into this first array. So if you write like this, as we have told that if you use only single individual array name followed by its name, it indicates the index of that element. So if I write here scores of 3, it takes only the index at element 3. So but do we have index of 3 here? If you need to store 3 elements 0, 1, 2, only index ends with 2. But you are writing here 3 scores of 3, but we don't have any index 3 here. So you cannot assign scores of 3 to the, or directly you cannot write first is equal to scores. So you should not assign a complete array into a complete another array. So in order to assign all these values into another array, we need to assign it element by element. Say for example, we can assign first of 1 is equal to scores of 1. So this assigns that the scores of 1, the value in scores of 1, that's 80, will be copied to the array first. So first of 1, I am indicating the index 1 in array first. So this 80 will be copied here. So first of 0 is equal to scores of 0. This indicates that the element that is present in scores array at 0 index will be copied to the array first at index 0. So first, similarly first of 2 is equal to scores of 2. So this scores of 2 element, that is 50, will be copied to first of 2. As we have seen that we have written 3 statements, this can be reduced to one single statement using loop. We'll see how we can do this. So for I is equal to 0, I less than, so we want to store the elements into the array first. The size of the array is 3. So I less than 3, I plus plus. So as the size of the scores and the size of first is both are same, we can use any of the size. So you will write this first of I is equal to scores of I. So when you execute this, in the first iteration the value of I is 0. So first of, in the place of I, 0 will be substituted, and in the place of scores of I, 0 will be substituted. So in first iteration, scores of 0 is equal to first of I. So then scores of 0 element will be copied to first array. Then in second iteration, I value is equal to 1. So scores of 1 is equal to first of 1. In third iteration, scores of 2 is equal to first of 2. So likewise, these 3 statements can be reduced to one single statement using some loop. So this is about storing values into an array. Thank you.